I never imagined I'd spend my 67th birthday sitting alone on a plastic bench at the Greyhound station in Hamilton, watching my son's pickup truck disappear down York Boulevard with everything I owned packed in the back. But there I was, December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of betrayal. It started 3 months ago, when my son Kevin made me an offer that seemed too good to refuse. "Dad," he'd said, his voice warm with concern I should have recognized as counterfeit, "this house is too big for you now that Mom's gone. Why don't you sell it and come live with us? We've got that basement apartment, completely private. You'd have your own space, and we'd be right upstairs if you needed anything. Plus, you'd get to see Emma every day." Emma, my granddaughter, 7 years old with her grandmother's smile and my stubborn streak. The thought of seeing her every morning was what sealed the deal. I'd been rattling around that empty house in Dundas for 2 years since Margaret passed, talking to her photo on the mantel, eating microwave dinners alone at a table built for 4. The loneliness was eating me alive. So I sold the house, $430,000, paid off the small mortgage I had left, and walked away with $380,000 in my account. Kevin suggested I invest most of it, keep it safe for Emma's education. His wife Danielle knew a financial advisor, a friend of her brother's. I signed papers I didn't fully understand, trusting my son because that's what fathers do. I should have known something was wrong when Danielle started redecorating the basement apartment before I even moved in. The cozy space Kevin had shown me, the one with the little kitchenette and the window overlooking the garden, was suddenly being converted into a home gym. "We thought you'd be more comfortable upstairs," Danielle explained, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "The guest room has its own bathroom, much more convenient for someone your age." Someone my age. I was 67, not 97. I'd spent 40 years as a carpenter, building houses with my own 2 hands. I could still swing a hammer straighter than most men half my age. But I swallowed my pride and moved into the guest room, a 10 by 12 box with a window facing the neighbor's brick wall. The first month wasn't terrible. I saw Emma every day after school, helped her with homework, taught her how to build a birdhouse in Kevin's garage. She called me Grandpa Hammer because of all my tools, and hearing her laugh made the cramped room feel less like a prison. But then the rules started. No using the kitchen after 8 p.m. because Danielle was a light sleeper. No having the television too loud because it disturbed her work calls. No coming upstairs without texting first because they valued their privacy. I was a guest in what was supposed to be my home, tiptoeing through a house that existed because of my money. I tried talking to Kevin about it. "Son," I said one evening, when Danielle was out with friends, "this isn't what we agreed on. I feel like I'm in the way here. Maybe I should look for my own place, something small but mine." Kevin's face hardened. "Dad, you gave most of your money to the investment fund, remember? You can't afford your own place right now. Besides, Danielle's trying her best. You just need to adjust." I didn't remember agreeing to give most of my money to anything. I remembered investing some of it, keeping the rest accessible. But when I asked to see the statements, Kevin waved me off. "You don't need to worry about that stuff, Dad. It's all being managed. Just enjoy your retirement." The week before Christmas, everything fell apart. I'd made cookies with Emma, a tradition Margaret and I had started when Kevin was a boy. Sugar cookies with red and green sprinkles, the whole kitchen smelling like butter and vanilla. Emma was covered in flour, giggling as I let her eat the raw dough scraps. Danielle came home early and lost her mind. "What is this mess?" she screamed, her face twisted with anger I'd never seen before. "Frank, I specifically told you not to use my kitchen. And Emma, you know you're not allowed sugar before dinner." Emma started crying. I tried to explain that it was Christmas tradition, that we were just having fun. But Danielle wasn't listening. That night, I heard them arguing upstairs. Kevin's voice was low, placating. Danielle's was sharp, cutting through the floorboards. "He needs to go. This isn't working. I didn't sign up to babysit your father." Kevin said something I couldn't hear. Then Danielle, clear as day. "Either he's out by New Year's, or I'm taking Emma to my mother's, and we're having a serious conversation about our marriage." The next morning, Kevin knocked on my door. "Dad, we need to talk." He didn't look me in the eye when he said it. There's a really nice seniors residence in Burlington. Danielle's brother works there. They have a room available, and it's very affordable. Affordable with what money? I asked, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Kevin, where's my money? The $380,000 from the house? Kevin's jaw tightened. It's invested, Dad. Long-term investments. You can't access it right now without penalties. How much can I access? I demanded. He was quiet for a long moment. About $12,000. But that won't last long at the seniors' home without supplementing it with your pension. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. $12,000 from $380,000. My entire life's savings, the house Margaret and I had worked 40 years to pay off, reduced to pocket change. Where's the rest, Kevin? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The investments are complicated, Dad. The market's been volatile. Some of it was used for the house renovations, for Emma's private school tuition. It's all family money. It benefits all of us. All of us. But I was being asked to leave. I need time to figure this out, I said. Just give me until after Christmas. Kevin shook his head. Danielle's already booked you a bus ticket to Burlington for the 23rd. The residence is expecting you. I'm sorry, Dad, but this is what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone. What he meant was what's best for Danielle. The morning of December 23rd, Kevin loaded my 2 suitcases into his truck. I'd asked to say goodbye to Emma, but Danielle had taken her to a play date early that morning. No doubt deliberate. Kevin drove me to the Greyhound station instead of the Burlington seniors' home. I'll send your things once you're settled, he said, not meeting my eyes. The ticket's for Burlington. You can catch a cab from the station to the residence. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a bus ticket and $200 cash. That's all I can spare right now, he said. I'll send more when I can. I stood there, holding that envelope, watching my son prepare to abandon me at a bus station 2 days before Christmas. 40 years of sawdust and splinters, of overtime shifts and missed vacations, of sacrificing everything so he could go to university and become something better than a carpenter. And this was my reward. Kevin, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How did we get here? For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or grief for the relationship we used to have. But then his phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. I've got to go, Dad. Danielle needs me to pick up some things for Christmas dinner. Take care of yourself. He was gone before I could respond. I watched his truck pull away, taking my belongings, my savings, my family with it. The December wind cut through my thin jacket, and I realized I didn't even have proper winter clothes. Those were in the suitcases Kevin had promised to send. I sat on that plastic bench for hours. I counted my money, $216, including what was in my wallet. Over and over, as if the amount might magically increase. I watched families reunite for the holidays, children running into grandparents' arms, couples embracing after long trips. The joy around me felt like a cruel joke. The Burlington bus came and went. I couldn't make myself get on it. The thought of checking into a senior's residence alone on Christmas Eve, as a charity case, as someone my own son couldn't be bothered to keep around. The shame was paralyzing. The station announcer called the last bus of the evening. Hamilton to Toronto, departing in 15 minutes. Then they'd be closing for the holiday. I didn't know where I'd go. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't sit in this station any longer, surrounded by Christmas cheer that felt like mockery. Excuse me. The voice was gravelly, weathered by time. I looked up to see an elderly man, probably in his early 80s, standing before me. He was well dressed in a wool overcoat and leather gloves that spoke of money. But his face was kind, creased with the lines of someone who'd smiled often in his life. I couldn't help but notice you've been sitting here most of the day, he said. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said automatically. Then, because I was too tired to pretend, I added, Actually, no, I'm not fine at all, but there's nothing to be done about it. The old man gestured to the space beside me. Mind if I sit? My driver's running late, and these old bones appreciate any excuse to rest. I nodded, and he lowered himself onto the bench with the careful movements of someone managing chronic pain. We sat in silence for a moment, watching a young mother struggle with luggage and a toddler. "Waiting for someone?" he asked finally. "No," I admitted. "I was waiting for a bus I couldn't make myself get on." He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Where were you headed?" "A senior's residence in Burlington. My son arranged it." I gestured vaguely at the world beyond the station windows. "I'd rather freeze on a park bench than go there like some discarded piece of furniture." The old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to me with an assessing look. "My name is Harold Morrison, and unless I miss my guess, you've got the look of a man who's been betrayed by someone he trusted." "My son," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "He took my money, kicked me out of his house, and dropped me here like I was his problem to dispose of." Harold nodded slowly. "How much did he take?" "Everything." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I sold my house for him. $400,000, and I've got 200 left. Merry Christmas to me." Harold's eyes sharpened with something I couldn't read. "And you have nowhere to go? No other family?" "My wife passed 2 years ago. My brother's in Victoria, and we haven't spoken in 15 years. I shrugged. "I've got nobody." "Neither do I," Harold said quietly. "My wife's been gone for 20 years. My daughter died in a car accident 18 years ago. And my son," Harold's voice caught, "my son and I haven't spoken since the day I told him he was dead to me. That was in 2005. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "What happened? If you don't mind me asking." "He wanted to marry a woman I didn't approve of." Harold's voice was heavy with regret. "I thought I knew better. I thought I was protecting him. I gave him an ultimatum, her or his family. He chose her, and I was too proud to admit I was wrong. Now I don't even know if he's alive or dead." The weight of his words hung between us. Two old men, both separated from their sons, both alone at Christmas. The parallel wasn't lost on me. Harold's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. "My driver's here. He's taking me home to Oakville." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I'm going to make you an unusual proposition, Frank. You can refuse, and I'll understand completely." "My name is Frank," I said, confused. "How did you know that?" Harold smiled slightly. "I didn't. Lucky guess. Now, here's my proposition. I live alone in a house far too large for one person. I have a housekeeper who comes daily, but she leaves by 6. Every Christmas Eve for the past 18 years, I've eaten dinner alone, looking at empty chairs that should hold my wife, my daughter, my son." He met my eyes directly. "I'm proposing that you come home with me tonight. Stay through Christmas, at least. Keep an old man company. I'll pay you $500 for your time, replace any belongings you need, and help you figure out your next steps. No strings attached." I stared at him. "You don't know me. I could be anyone. A criminal, a con man." "You could be," Harold agreed, "but I've been in business for 60 years, and I've learned to read people. You're a working man who got betrayed by his own blood. I can see it in your hands. Those are carpenter's hands if I've ever seen them. And I can see it in your eyes. You're angry, but you're not cruel." He stood slowly. "What do you say, Frank? Would you rather spend Christmas Eve figuring out your next move in a warm house with good food, or on a park bench in Hamilton?" I should have said no. Every cautious instinct I had was screaming that this was bizarre, potentially dangerous, too good to be true. But I looked at Harold Morrison, at the loneliness that mirrored my own, and I thought about my alternatives. "One night," I said. "I'll stay one night, and then I'll figure things out." Harold extended his hand. "One night then, my car is outside." Harold's driver, a professional-looking man named Vincent, didn't bat an eye when a stranger climbed into the back of the black BMW beside his employer. The drive to Oakville took about 40 minutes, and Harold filled it with easy conversation about the weather, the holiday traffic, his favorite Christmas memories from childhood. He was remarkably easy to talk to. I found myself telling him about Margaret, about Kevin as a boy, about the house I'd built with my own hands and lost to my own son's greed. Harold listened without judgment, asking questions that showed genuine interest. We turned onto a tree-lined street in Old Oakville. where the houses were set back from the road behind manicured lawns and iron gates. Harold's home was a Georgian-style brick mansion, with white columns and windows glowing warm against the December darkness. "Welcome to Morrison House," Harold said as we pulled into the circular driveway. "It's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it in 1922. The housekeeper, a sturdy woman in her 60s named Mrs. Chen, met us at the door. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, but she recovered quickly. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "you didn't mention we'd have a guest for Christmas Eve." "Last-minute addition," Harold said smoothly. "Patricia, this is Frank Campbell. He'll be staying with us through the holidays. Please prepare the blue guest room." Patricia's expression cycled through surprise, curiosity, and something that looked almost like hope. "Of course, sir. I'll have it ready in 20 minutes. Should I set another place for dinner?" "Please do. And Patricia," Harold's voice softened, "it's good to have someone else in this house at Christmas, isn't it?" Patricia's professional mask cracked into a genuine smile. "Yes, sir. It certainly is." The interior of the house was exactly what you'd expect from old money. Hardwood floors polished to a mirror shine, original artwork on the walls, furniture that had witnessed a century of Morrison family history. A Christmas tree stood in the front parlor, decorated with ornaments that looked antique. But what struck me most was how empty it all felt. This massive house, clearly meant for a large family, occupied by one old man and his staff. Harold showed me to the blue guest room, a space larger than the apartment Kevin had given me, with a 4-poster bed and windows overlooking a snow-covered garden. "Dinner's at 7, Harold said. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. My son's, actually. He left them behind when he left. I've never been able to throw them out." I looked at the closet, at the clothes belonging to a son who'd been banished for falling in love. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why help a stranger?" Harold was quiet for a moment. "Because it's Christmas Eve, and we're both alone. Because I've spent 18 years trying to buy my way out of loneliness, and it never works. And because he met my eyes, maybe helping you will balance out some of the wrong I've done in my life." He left me to get settled, and I sat on the edge of that expensive bed, trying to make sense of the last 12 hours. This morning I'd been dreading a senior's residence. Now I was in a mansion, about to have Christmas Eve dinner with a millionaire who'd lost his family the same way I had. Life had a cruel sense of humor. Dinner was served in a formal dining room that could have seated 20. Patricia had set 3 places, Harold at the head, me to his right, and herself across from me. "I always eat with Harold on Christmas Eve," she explained when she saw my surprise. "I've done for 15 years now. Otherwise, he'd be completely alone." Harold raised his wine glass. "To unexpected guests," he said, "and to second chances." We ate roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, Brussels sprouts, and mashed potatoes. All the traditional fixings. The wine was expensive, the conversation easy, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. After dinner, Patricia excused herself to finish preparing for the next day, and Harold led me to his study. It was a wood-paneled room lined with books, a fire crackling in the hearth. Above the fireplace hung 3 portraits: a beautiful woman with kind eyes, a young woman who looked just like her, and a young man with Harold's jawline. "My wife Eleanor," Harold said, following my gaze. "My daughter Catherine, and my son Richard." "They're beautiful," I said. "Your daughter looks just like her mother." "She did." Harold's voice was thick. "Catherine died when she was 24. A drunk driver ran a red light. Eleanor never recovered. She passed the following year, and I've always believed it was from a broken heart." "And Richard?" Harold sank into a leather armchair by the fire. "Richard was always the sensitive one. He wanted to be a musician, play violin professionally. I wanted him to take over my development company. We fought constantly about his future. Then he met Jennifer. She was a waitress at a diner downtown. No education, no family money, no social standing. I told Richard she was beneath him. I offered to pay her off if she'd leave him alone." Harold's face twisted with old shame. Richard was furious. He told me I was a snob, that I cared more about status than his happiness. He was right, of course, but I was too proud to see it. The last time I saw him, I told him that if he married that girl, he was no longer my son. He walked out, and I haven't heard from him since. Have you tried to find him? Many times. He changed his last name, disappeared completely. He might be dead for all I know. Or he might be living in a suburb somewhere, with a family and grandchildren I'll never meet. Harold looked at me directly. That's why I brought you here, Frank. Not because I'm lonely, though I am, but because I saw myself in your son. I saw what I did to Richard, and I wanted to do something different. I wanted to help someone my own son's age, someone whose father failed them. Kevin's 42, I said quietly. And I don't think I failed him. I think he failed me. Maybe so. But failure in families is rarely one-sided. I drove Richard away with my pride. Maybe you pushed Kevin in ways you didn't realize. The words stung because there was truth in them. I'd wanted Kevin to be a carpenter like me, to value honest work over corporate climbing. When he'd chosen university, business school, a different path, I'd made my disappointment known. Maybe not explicitly, but it was there, a constant undercurrent of disapproval. He was embarrassed by me, I admitted, by my job, my rough hands, my lack of education. I think he saw me as someone to escape from, not someone to be proud of. And how did you make him feel about that? I was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the portraits of Harold's lost family. I probably made him feel guilty, I finally said. Every time he mentioned his job, his house, his successful friends, I'd make some comment about how real men work with their hands. I thought I was teasing, but looking back, it was cruel. Harold nodded slowly. We hurt the people we love most because we expect them to understand what we can't say. Richard knew I loved him, so I thought I could criticize without consequence. I was wrong. We talked deep into the night about fathers and sons, about pride and regret, about the walls we build between ourselves and the people we love. Harold told me about his development company, how he'd built it from nothing after inheriting only debts from his own father. I told him about the houses I'd built, the satisfaction of seeing something you made with your own hands stand for decades. When I finally went to bed, it was well past midnight. Christmas Day had arrived, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading it. Christmas morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. I found Harold already in the breakfast room, looking through a stack of papers. "Merry Christmas, Frank," he said. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," I admitted. "This is a very comfortable house." "It's too comfortable," Harold replied. "That's the problem. It's easy to hide here, to pretend the outside world doesn't exist." He pushed a folder across the table. "I've been thinking about your situation. Your son essentially stole your money through a fraudulent investment scheme. That's illegal." "Probably," I agreed. "But Kevin's my son. I can't exactly report him to the police." "Why not?" The question hung in the air. Why not? Because family didn't do that to family. Because despite everything, I still loved him. Because if I sent my own son to jail, what would that make me? "I don't want revenge," I said finally. "I just want my life back. My dignity." Harold nodded. "Then let me help you with that. I have lawyers, good ones. They can look into your financial situation, see what can be recovered legally. You may have more options than you think. I can't pay for lawyers." "Consider it a Christmas gift," Harold said. "Or consider it an investment. I've been alone in this house for far too long. Having you here last night was the best Christmas Eve I've had since Eleanor died. If helping you means I get company for a little longer, that's a fair trade." Patricia joined us for Christmas dinner. She'd prepared a turkey with all the trimmings, and we ate in the formal dining room with candles lit and carols playing softly in the background. It was surreal, this parody of family, but it was also oddly comforting. After dinner, Harold excused himself for his afternoon nap, and Patricia and I cleaned up together. "You know," she said as we loaded the dishwasher, "Mr. Morrison hasn't been this animated in years. Usually on holidays, he barely eats. Just sits in his study staring at those portraits." "He's been very kind to me," I said. "I still don't quite understand why." Patricia dried her hands and looked at me seriously. "Mr. Morrison has spent the last 18 years trying to atone for driving away his son. He donates to charities, funds, scholarships, supports community programs, but nothing fills the void. She paused. When he saw you at that bus station, alone and betrayed by your own child, I think he saw a chance to help someone in a way he never helped Richard. He told me about Richard, I said. About the ultimatum. Patricia nodded. It destroyed him. Not right away. Pride kept him going for years. But as he got older, as the loneliness set in, he realized what he'd lost. He hired private investigators, tried to track Richard down. Nothing. It's like his son vanished from the earth. Maybe Richard doesn't want to be found. Maybe, Patricia agreed. But that doesn't stop Harold from hoping. That evening, Harold and I sat in his study again, watching the fire. He seemed contemplative, quieter than he'd been the day before. Frank, he said finally, I need to tell you something. I'm not entirely well. I waited, sensing what was coming. Prostate cancer, he continued. Diagnosed 8 months ago. The doctors say I have maybe a year, possibly 2 if treatment goes well. I'm sorry, I said. That's a hard thing to face. It is, Harold agreed. But it's also clarifying. When you know your time is limited, you stop caring about things that don't matter. Money, status, what people think of you. None of it means anything when you're staring down your own mortality. He turned to face me. What matters is connection, relationships. Being remembered not for what you accumulated, but for how you treated people. And on that count, I've failed miserably. You're not failing now, I pointed out. You took in a complete stranger at Christmas. One good deed doesn't erase a lifetime of selfishness. Harold shook his head. But maybe it's a start. The next few days blurred together in a strange rhythm. I stayed at Harold's house, partly because I had nowhere else to go, partly because I genuinely enjoyed his company. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He showed me his art collection, and I showed him proper technique for fixing a squeaky door. Harold's lawyer, a sharp woman named Barbara Chen, no relation to Patricia, came by on December 28th to review my financial situation. What she found was damning. Your son and his wife have been systematically draining your investment account, she explained, spreading documents across Harold's dining table. The original investment was legitimate, but they've been making unauthorized withdrawals disguised as management fees. There's a clear paper trail. How much is left? I asked, dreading the answer. Of the original $380,000, approximately $47,000 remains. She looked at me with professional sympathy. However, there's enough evidence here to pursue civil recovery, possibly criminal charges against my own son. Barbara continued, You also have a strong case for financial elder abuse. Your son held a position of trust, controlled your access to information, and systematically depleted your assets while keeping you financially dependent on him. What would happen if I pressed charges? Best case, your son faces significant penalties and is forced to make restitution. Worst case, prison time. Either way, your relationship with him would likely be irreparably damaged. I laughed bitterly. It's already irreparably damaged. He left me at a bus station with $200 2 days before Christmas. Harold, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. The question isn't whether Kevin deserves consequences. He clearly does. The question is what outcome Frank wants. Revenge? Justice? Reconciliation? I don't know, I admitted. A week ago, I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel as abandoned as I did. But now, I thought about our conversations, about Richard, about the walls that built up between fathers and sons. Now I just want to understand why he did it. Then let's find out, Harold said. Barbara, is there a way to confront Kevin without immediately pressing charges? To give him a chance to explain himself? Barbara considered. We could send a formal letter outlining the evidence and requesting a meeting. Make it clear that legal action is being considered, but leave the door open for resolution. Do it, I said, but I want to be there when he reads it. The meeting was arranged for January 3rd at Barbara's office in downtown Toronto. Kevin came alone, Danielle apparently having decided this wasn't her problem. He looked tired, older than his 42 years, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. Barbara laid out the evidence methodically. The unauthorized withdrawals, the forged signatures, the paper trail showing exactly how my money had been funneled into Kevin's accounts, Danielle's business ventures, their mortgage payments. Kevin listened in silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When Barbara finished, he finally spoke. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It started small. We needed money for the house renovations, and I figured you wouldn't miss a little bit. Then Danielle's business needed capital, and the private school fees were higher than expected, and it just kept growing. So you stole from your own father?" I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You took my life savings and gave me a bus ticket." Kevin's eyes finally met mine. I know what I did, and I'm sorry, Dad. I was in over my head, and I didn't know how to tell you. When Danielle said you had to leave, I panicked. I thought if you went to that residence, you'd never find out. You'd just live there on your pension, and I'd send money when I could, and none of this would come to light. You thought you'd just hide it forever, I said. Let your father die in a nursing home, never knowing his own son had robbed him blind. Kevin flinched. When you say it like that, it sounds monstrous. It is monstrous, Kevin. It is. Silence stretched between us. Barbara watched, pen poised, waiting for direction. What do you want, Dad? Kevin finally asked. Do you want me to go to prison? Do you want to destroy my marriage? Take away everything I have? I can't give you back the money. It's gone. Spent. I have maybe 20,000 in savings, and that's all. What about the house? Barbara interjected. Your mortgage payments were made with Frank's money. There's a strong argument that he has equity in the property. Kevin paled further. The house is in Danielle's name. She'll never agree to sell. That may not be her choice, Barbara said coolly. I held up a hand. I don't want your house, Kevin. I don't want you in prison. I just want to understand one thing. Are you ashamed of me? Is that why you did this? Because you couldn't stand having your working-class father around embarrassing you in front of your wife's fancy friends? Kevin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I was ashamed, he admitted. Not of you, Dad. Of myself. Of where I came from. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was more than a carpenter's son, more than Hamilton working class. And the more successful I got, the more I resented the reminders of what I used to be. So I was a reminder, I said. Something to be discarded. No. Yes. Kevin buried his face in his hands. I don't know anymore. Danielle kept telling me you didn't fit in our life, that you were bringing down our social standing. And I believed her because it was easier than defending you. Easier than admitting I was still that kid from Dundas who didn't belong in the fancy world I'd clawed my way into. The words hung in the air between us. I thought about all the times I'd made Kevin feel small for his ambitions, all the comments about real work and honest labor. I'd been so proud of my own path that I'd never stopped to consider that Kevin might need a different one. We've both made mistakes, I said finally. I pushed you away because you wanted a different life than the one I had. You pushed me away because I reminded you of a past you wanted to escape. We failed each other, Kevin. Not just you, both of us. Kevin looked up, tears streaming down his face. I don't know how to fix this, Dad. Neither do I admitted. But maybe we start by being honest. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more stealing. Just two people trying to figure out how to be father and son again. Barbara cleared her throat. If you want to pursue a non-legal resolution, I can draw up a repayment agreement. Kevin commits to reimbursing a set amount over time, and Frank agrees not to press charges as long as payments are made. I looked at Kevin. Can you commit to that? He nodded slowly. I'll find a way. Even if it means selling the house and downsizing. Even if Danielle leaves me over it. And can you commit to something else? To letting Emma have a relationship with me? A real one, not supervised visits controlled by Danielle. Kevin's expression softened. Emma misses you, Dad. She cries for Grandpa Hammer every night. Danielle won't let me talk about it, but I see it in her eyes. She doesn't understand why you left. I didn't leave, I said gently. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is making things right. Barbara drew up the agreement. Kevin would repay $150,000 over 10 years, secured against his future earnings. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue criminal charges, and we'd both commit to family counseling to repair what had been broken. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to justice. But it was a start. I returned to Harold's house that evening, emotionally exhausted but strangely at peace. Harold was waiting in the study, a fire crackling as always. "How did it go?" he asked. I told him everything. The confrontation, the confession, the agreement. Harold listened without interruption, nodding occasionally. "You're a better man than I am," he said when I finished. I couldn't have forgiven Richard so easily. "I haven't forgiven Kevin," I clarified. "Not yet, but I've opened the door to forgiveness. That's different." Harold smiled sadly. "I wish I'd had your wisdom 18 years ago. Maybe things would have been different with Richard." "It's not too late," I said. "You're still alive. He's probably still alive. There has to be a way to find him." Harold shook his head. "I've tried everything. He doesn't want to be found." "Then stop trying to find him," I said. "Start trying to reach him. Write a letter. Not through lawyers or private investigators. Just a letter from a father to his son, saying everything you should have said years ago. Post it everywhere you can think of. Facebook, newspapers, wherever. If Richard is out there, and he sees that his father is dying and wants to make amends, maybe he'll respond." Harold stared at me. "That's either brilliant or insane." "Probably both," I agreed. "But what do you have to lose?" 3 weeks later, Harold's letter was published in the Toronto Star, the Vancouver Sun, and half a dozen other newspapers across Canada. It was also posted on social media, shared by thousands of people moved by an old man's public plea for his son's forgiveness. The response was overwhelming. People wrote in with their own stories of family estrangement, of regret, of reconciliation. A foundation offered to help fund the search. Radio stations wanted interviews. Harold became, briefly, a symbol of fatherly love, too late expressed. But Richard himself remained silent. Days passed, then weeks. Harold grew quieter, sicker, the cancer advancing despite treatment. I stayed at the house, having moved in officially at Harold's insistence. Patricia and I took turns sitting with him during his worst days. Then, on February 14th, Valentine's Day, the doorbell rang. I answered it to find a man in his early 50s standing on the porch. He had Harold's jawline, Eleanor's eyes, and the look of someone who'd been crying for days. "Is this the Morrison residence?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "It is," I said, my heart pounding. "Are you Richard?" He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I saw the letter. "I've been driving for 3 days from Alberta. Is my father? Is he still alive?" "He's alive," I said, "and I think you'd better come in." The reunion between Harold and Richard was the most moving thing I've ever witnessed. Richard fell to his knees beside his father's bed, sobbing apologies for 18 years of silence. Harold, weak but lucid, reached out with trembling hands to touch his son's face. "I never stopped loving you," Harold whispered. "Not for a single day." "I know, Dad," Richard said. "I know. I was just too proud to come back. Too afraid you'd reject me again." "Never." Harold's voice cracked. "I was wrong about Jennifer. Wrong about everything. Can you ever forgive me?" Richard laughed through his tears. "I forgave you years ago, Dad. I just didn't know how to tell you." They had 6 weeks together before Harold passed. 6 weeks of making up for 18 years of silence. Richard's wife, Jennifer, came, and she was nothing like Harold had imagined. Warm, kind, and devoted to her husband. Their children, Harold's grandchildren, visited every weekend. The house that had been so empty filled with laughter and noise and life. Harold died on April 1st, surrounded by the family he'd thought lost forever. His last words were to Richard. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have said it 20 years ago. I'm proud of the man you became." The will reading happened 2 weeks later. Most of Harold's estate went to Richard, as expected. But there was a surprise. To Frank Campbell, Barbara read, "I leave Morrison House. along with an endowment of $500,000 for its maintenance and upkeep, on the condition that he live in it for at least 6 months of each year and use it to help at least one person annually who needs a second chance. The way I helped him. Richard reached over and shook my hand. "My father told me about you," he said, "about how you helped him find the courage to reach out to me. That letter was your idea." "I just suggested it," I said, overwhelmed. "Harold did the hard part." "But you gave him hope." Richard's eyes were wet, and because of that, I got to say goodbye to my father. I got to introduce him to his grandchildren. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Morrison House became mine, legally and completely. I live here now, in this house that still feels too large for one person. But I've kept the guest room ready, just like Harold asked. In the 3 years since Harold died, 11 people have stayed in that room. People going through divorces, job losses, family estrangement, people who needed a safe place to figure out their next moves. Richard sends candidates sometimes. People his foundation encounters who need more than financial help. Kevin and I are better now. Not perfect, but better. He divorced Danielle, who turned out to be having an affair with her brother's business partner. Lost half of everything in the settlement, but seemed almost relieved. He moved to a smaller house in Burlington with Emma, who stays with me every other weekend. Emma's 12 now, and she's learning woodworking in the shop I set up in Harold's old garage. She doesn't care that her grandfather used to lay bricks, or that some people think we come from different worlds. She just knows her grandpa Hammer tells good stories and makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches. Last week, I was at the Greyhound station in Hamilton. Same place where my journey began 5 years ago. I was picking up a young carpenter who'd lost his job and his apartment in the same week, one of Richard's foundation referrals. As I stood in the arrivals area, I thought about that December day when Kevin left me here, when I thought my life had hit rock bottom, and I realized that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just the universe's way of pushing us toward where we're supposed to be. Harold saved me that day, but I think I saved him too. 2 lonely old men who found family in the most unlikely place. I keep Harold's photo in the study now, next to one of Richard and his children. Sometimes I talk to him, tell him about Emma's latest project or Kevin's slow progress toward becoming the son I always hoped he'd be. I like to think he can hear me, wherever he is. Morrison House isn't just a building anymore. It's a home filled with second chances and new beginnings. It's proof that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most. Who sees value in you when everyone else sees nothing worth keeping. And every day, I keep that guest room ready, waiting for the next person who needs what Harold gave me. A chance, a home, and someone who believes they're worth saving. Because that's what fathers do. The real ones, anyway. They see potential where others see problems. They offer hope when all seems lost. They remind you that it's never too late to rebuild, to start over, to become the person you were meant to be. That's Harold's legacy. Not the money, or the house, or the foundation, but the ripple effect of one act of kindness at a bus station on a December day. One old man who decided that maybe, just maybe, the stranger on the bench was worth saving. And maybe, just maybe, we saved each other.